What makes the unknown so terrifying? Fear of the unknown is something that we as humans are unable to control or understand. It represents a kind of horror that always lurks just out of reach, keeping us constantly in dread of what remains unknown. Whilst there's a large consensus in mainstream horror today that fear is best created by moments of explosive tension and jump scares, the fear of the unknown provides an alternative to our traditional understanding of horror. Devoid of sudden releases of tension, it causes the audience to be constantly on alert, denied any opportunity for rest. The unknown relies on feelings of dread, unfamiliarity, and a sense of hopelessness against a force that cannot be seen or understood. Perhaps one of the best examples of this fear could be found in science fiction writer H.P. Lovecraft's story, The Call of Cthulhu. In the short story, we follow the narrator Francis Thurston as he searches through the possessions of his deceased uncle, George Angel. During this process, he unearths a small sculpture of a strange creature made by a student who had been having vivid nightmares of a monolithic city under the ocean. This sculpture leads Angel to discover many similar events, seemingly linked to a cult surrounding an eldritch entity known as Cthulhu. Towards the end of the story, we finally come to a log on board the derelict ship Emma, written by the sole survivor of their voyage to find Cthulhu. After weeks of searching, they had stumbled upon an island covered in monolithic buildings and strange oozing shores. As they explored the island, they come to a door, decorated with grotesque stone moulding, a door so vast the crew wondered how it could exist in this universe. Then, slowly, the door begins to open. In a way so unnatural the rules of matter and perspective seemed upset, revealing a black, endless void. Soon, the creature lumbers into sight. The thing cannot be described. Such eldritch contradictions of all matter, force and cosmic order. A mountain walked or stumbled. Such a creature should not exist, cannot exist, and yet it does, lumbering out of that impossible door and releasing itself upon the world. Lovecraft's description of this being leaves us feeling hopeless in the face of something we have no hope of understanding. But whilst Lovecraft's work was truly effective in conveying this hopelessness, it does not present the most effective way to convey the fear of the unknown. This style of media lacks a key element in order to truly experience this fear. As this work was written, the story is predetermined before we experience it. However, with video games, we are able to have a vastly more unknown experience, one where the player is directly in control. Darkwood is a game that uses the unknown to its fullest advantage. The game takes place somewhere within the Eastern Bloc during the 1980s, where a mysterious forest has engulfed a large area and continues to spread, trapping any survivors inside. Not only are they trapped, but the survivors also have to contend with a deadly disease, which has begun to mutate them into strange monsters and apparitions. The storyline of this game is itself shrouded in mystery, as initially we begin as the Doctor, who has been attempting to cure the disease and escape the forest. However, we later shift to a character known as the Stranger, who entered the forest for a secret passageway, one which requires a key taken by the Doctor from the Stranger. The game uses a number of mechanics in order to reinforce the unknown aspect. The first of these being a combination of the top-down perspective as well as the limited vision of the player. The top-down perspective disorientates the player, as this non-traditional view takes some getting used to. It also highlights our disassociation from the protagonist, adding to the unknown aspect. The vision mechanic also reinforces this, by limiting what the player is able to see whilst the rest of the map becomes a deep grey. The map itself also adds to the unknown. The player's location is only highlighted on the map when standing next to a significant structure. Furthermore, these structures as well as the map are randomly generated on each playthrough, meaning completing the game doesn't guarantee any knowledge of the map. There are many aspects of the game that create significant tension. Even during the daytime, which should provide some relief, I'm constantly on edge whilst playing. Searching locations around the map yields far more questions than answers, and I'm constantly disturbed by scenes I find in these monuments to utter chaos. But the most terrifying aspect of the game by far is the onset of darkness. One night on day 4 was particularly terrifying. As the light fades outside, the vibrant greens turn to shallow ambers, and finally a suffocating darkness envelops my vision. But I feel well prepared. I've laid traps, repaired my weapons, and I've covered the hole in the wall with a heavy wardrobe. As for the darkness, I've got some durability left on this torch, and I'm able to craft another if I need to. But I've got no planks left, and the machine to make them is outside. Suddenly, the darkness doesn't seem so tameable. And as the noises creep in around the house, I find myself becoming increasingly nervous. A grunt sounds outside one of the windows, a banging on the door nearby. I whip my torch around the darkness, trying to peer through the boards, when the light goes out, and I'm plunged into darkness. And then suddenly, I hear the slow creak of the cupboard moving from the hole in the wall. I'm glued to the door now, the last vestige of safety between me and whatever is creeping around the house. I hear the footsteps get closer and closer, and the tension that's building is unbearable. I lift my board, but soon it's on top of me. A desperate struggle against an assailant I can't see, wild swings in the darkness connecting and flinging blood across the room. And then it's over. Finally, crimson light seeps into the room, and that warm resonant synth lets me know I've survived another night. Fear isn't nearly as apparent in Outer Wilds. On the surface, Outer Wilds doesn't appear to be a horror game. You play as a member of the Hearthian race on your home world of Timber Hearth. You are an astronaut about to embark on their first mission to explore the solar system and the ancient civilization known as the Naomi. After mastering control of your ship on a model probe, as well as practicing your own movement in space, you feel equipped and excited to explore the universe. You lift off from your home world, and the blue and green planet grows smaller. The feeling of the unknown and the uncertainty creeps in ever so slightly. My first target is a small moon orbiting the home planet. Exploring the landscape reveals a number of new mysteries, and the Naomi ruins seem so incredibly alien I can barely understand their purpose. Searching the ruins reveals that the Naomi were looking for a signal known as the Eye. This phenomenon appears to be older than the universe itself, and the ruins were one of many unsuccessful machines built to locate it. After playing with the ruins for a while, I decide it's best to return to the ship. I look around for the marker when I see it. Far away from the warm yellow and orange, the sun has turned into a furious deep red. It's grown obese, almost enveloping the two closest planets. That's when the music shifts, as if to signal its demise. And then, without warning, it begins to fold in on itself, layers of plasma falling into its core. In seconds it collapses into an impossible point. And then, it's all over. But I don't die. My life is played back to me, and I soon wake up in front of the campfire I started the game at. In my next life, I explore a fractured blue rock known as Brittle Hollow, orbited by a volcanic moon. I touch down on the surface and leap my way towards a giant yawning crack that reveals the monster that resides within. A deep, endless black, light warping around its gaping mouth, a black hole. But beyond this, stairways and platforms line the interior, and as I explore these paths I find houses, schools, an entire city clinging to the fragile walls slipping into the void. As I go further, and my route crumbles around me, my jumps become more and more precarious, and, in one poorly timed manoeuvre, I miss my landing, and begin slowly falling into the abyss. I'm panicking now, desperately using my jetpack to reach anything that might stop my descent into that endless gaping black. But it's useless, and I'm soon swallowed up. But instead of my life replaying like I'd expect, I'm teleported to the other side of the solar system. Seemingly, I've travelled through a white hole. So I float there, aimlessly gliding through the void, whilst my spaceship circles the sun thousands of miles away. Soon, that familiar music begins, and I watch again as the sun folds in front of me. In another life, I travel to the largest of the planets, Giants Deep. As I approach, I am reminded of the tales of a leviathan lurking under the waves that my fellow Hearthians had told me about. With this in mind, I breach the surface and prepare for whatever horrors lurk under the green blanket enveloping the planet. Immediately, I hear the rush of wind as tornadoes rip across the murky ocean. Some of these storms dwarf my fragile vessel, and I wrestle desperately with the controls to avoid being engulfed. I frantically try to navigate to one of those fragile rocks perched above the water, but my ship moves too fast into a tornado. But instead of being thrown into space, my ship is pulled under the waves. I prepare myself for a monstrous tentacle or a leviathan's jaws to envelop my ship, but instead, I spy a distant black orb pulsing underneath the surface. But whilst I contemplate this, an enormous storm sweeps over my ship and plucks me from the planet, sending me hurtling into the vacuum of space. And whilst the immediate horror of some hideous sea creature is behind me, I'm filled with more questions and tension about the nature of this planet. There's something unmatched about this fear. This feeling that you are completely hopeless in front of something you can't even begin to understand. It's a feeling of immense vulnerability. Each night in Darkwood is another desperate struggle to see the morning, and every life in Outer Wilds brings new discoveries, adding to the growing puzzle. But it's also intoxicating. There's something more to these mysteries that keeps unfolding, and I find myself coming back to them, despite the lingering dread whilst playing. Ultimately, whilst these games are terrifying, they're the most interesting to me, even if playing them terrifies me to my very core.